Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Filmmakers LA Monthly Film Festival. My name is Joumana Ismail. I'm the programming director at New Filmmakers Los Angeles. And for those of you who don't already know us, we're a nonprofit 501c3 organization that provides monthly opportunities like this one to the independent film community in Los Angeles and beyond. I would like to start this session by first acknowledging the Tongva, Chumash, and Kits as the past, present, and future caretakers of the land, water, and cultural resources in the unceded territory of Los Angeles. And I would also like to take a moment to affirm that NFMLA seeks actively to provide a safe space within our community for community members of all backgrounds and is inclusive of every race, nationality, sexual orientation, gender identity, age, religion, and ability. If you're here with us today, you're welcome here, and we're happy to have you. I would next like to take a moment to thank our incredible sponsors, without whom the work New Filmmakers LA does would not be possible, starting with our monthly venue host, the South Park Center, and its parent company, LBA Realty. Producer Circle sponsors Sunset Studios and SAG-AFTRA. Director Circle sponsors Sony Pictures Entertainment, Comcast NBC Universal Launch, the Walt Disney Studios, and Blackmagic Design. Foundation supporters, the LA City Department of Cultural Affairs, Golden Globe Foundation, the LA County Department of Arts and Culture, SNAP Foundation, the Bridges Larson Foundation, the California Arts Council, the Office of Los Angeles County Supervisor Holly J. Mitchell, and Bank of California. Our debut sponsors, PRG, SAG Indie, NBCU Academy, Mubi, Hub International Insurance Services, Burns & Sawyer, SBCine, Entertainment Partners, Scriptation, the MBS Group, Emerson College Los Angeles, SoCal Gas, Stars, Film LA, Motion Picture Association, the California Film Commission, and Fox. Academic partners, California State University Long Beach's Department of Film and Electronic Arts, California State University Northridge's Department of Cinema, New York Film Academy and Television Arts, Los Angeles City College, and Art Center College of Design. And of course, our media partners, Los Angeles Times and Movie Maker Magazine. So if you haven't taken a moment to review all of this weekend's festival programming, we encourage you to do so. We have a great lineup, so please go visit our website at nfmla.org to learn about the programs that we have coming up, both tomorrow and into next month. And with that, a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Today's Q&A is going to kick off with a 60-minute moderator-led discussion with our awesome panelists that we have here today. Throughout the discussion, we encourage you to use the chat to comment and talk about the things that are being covered. If you don't have your video on and you're somewhere where you can turn it on, please do, so that we can see you and you can see us and we can get to know each other face to face, and this can feel more like we're all in the same room together. And please also change your name on Zoom to reflect your name, title, and the institution or organization that you're representing, if that's applicable to you. Following our presentation, we're going to turn around to you, our audience members, for a 30-minute interactive audience Q&A. In order to ask a question during the Q&A, simply use the raise hand feature, which is available under the participants tab. Clicking that raise hand button is going to place you in queue to ask your question, and when it's your turn, a New Filmmakers LA staff member will unmute you. Please then make sure that you've also unmuted yourself on your end. And once you have the floor, we also ask that you limit yourself to 1 to 2 questions max. That way we can get questions from as many people as possible. And if we have extra time at the end, we will go back for another round of questions. If you don't have a microphone, you can also enter your question in the chat, and an NFMLA staff member will ask it for you. And please also be sure to mind your video background and your audio throughout the session if you're unmuted, if you're on camera. Since this is interactive and live, we ask that you remain aware that you're on camera if your video is turned on. And with that, I'm excited to introduce our moderator, Drysen Carsten. Take it away, Drysen.
Hello. Welcome, everyone, to today's Impact Storytelling in the Independent Animation Industry panel. I am super excited to introduce some really incredible people here today. Like was mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, we're going to save those for the last 30 minutes, so feel free to put them in the chat. We'll circle back to them. But it is my honor to introduce some really incredible people, such as the incredible team at Neon Zoo, starting with Joumana Ismail. She's an animator, character designer, and illustrator from Syria, living in London. We have Naghmeh Farzaneh, is a director and associate professor at the School of Cinematic Arts at DePaul University. We have Eric Larson, an Emmy-nominated animator, director, writer, and illustrator in New York City. Ana Mouyis is a Cypriot American director, animator, and assistant professor at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. And of course, Elise Kelly, the founder and award-winning director here at Neon Zoo, with a passion for giving a voice to the untold, unexpected, or even taboo stories. And as a fun fact, I found out recently she is a former cheesemonger, in case you did not know that. This panel today is brought to you by the New Filmmakers, Los Angeles, Neon Zoo, and Legends Animated. Legends Animated is a 501c3 nonprofit animation company that provides collaborative opportunities to create and showcase independent animation. To learn more about them, you're welcome to visit their website at legendsanimated.org. So, welcome everyone to the panel here today. I want to start with Elise. I want to ask you a question here because Neon Zoo focuses on social justice issues, documentary issues, and impact storytelling. So, just to start by solidifying what we're talking about today, can you define what that means?
That's a great question. I think I'll let everyone kind of dive in a little bit on how they kind of approach and think about this type of work. But I think kind of broad strokes, it has to do with making work that is often cause-based, is often initiative-based. So we do a lot of work in the nonprofit space for organizations like the ACLU. We do a number of things for journalistic outlets like the New Yorker, the Atlantic, and oftentimes either creating our own original documentaries or working on longer form documentaries and kind of creating animation for that. So it's kind of a mix and match, but the kind of heart of it has to do with, it's not necessarily just entertainment for entertainment's sake, right? Which I think all love, and I'm sure you'll hear from the rest of the panel how they were inspired to get into this field in the first place. But a lot of our work has some kind of social component behind it as well, and that often helps us drive the story in terms of how we're kind of portraying certain things, and then kind of goes beyond the films ideally and incites conversations. In certain cases, when we're working with those NGOs, enacting change as well. And I'll kind of let everyone else take it from here.
Perfect. So I guess I want to know, because the stories that you all as a group collectively are telling tend to not be entertainment, like you said. They are real, they are raw, they are hard hitting. So I want to hear from anyone on the panel. Feel free to just chime in. Why? Why do you do this?
That's a tough question. I don't know. I feel like those stories, I can relate to a lot of them. Given I've been through a lot of experiences in my life, I feel like there's this sort of commonality that moves me and wants and pushes me to tell those stories, I feel. It's just more of a human connection. I don't know.
Yeah, I think for me it was, I mean, a lot of the work I've done with Neon Zoo has been, you know, in that sort of documentary realm, but I think my personal work also tends to be based on reality, or, you know, influenced by reality. And I don't know, I think it just, when it feels like you're making something that has some kind of impact or meaning, it's easier to get invested in it, for me at least. Like, I was never, maybe it's because of my background. I started as an illustrator and like went into editorial illustration, which was always like, make a single image that represents like a story or a news article or something, and like trying to infuse meaning into imagery. And that's sort of just the direction that I went in my work. So
yeah, kind of adding to what Joumana and Ana just said, I think all of us are coming from a non-traditional animation background, and coming from different fields in art. You really think about the concept behind the work that you do a lot more. And then once you get into animation, because animation has been described as pure entertainment, especially in US, and it's not recognized so much as an art form. So when you see it as an art form, it really opens up lots of opportunities for you to bring those concepts and exactly what Joumana and Ana said, bringing that closeness, the humanity of it into it, and kind of create an impact through something that it's known as entertainment, because as soon as you show someone an animated film, when you say it's an animation, their eyes get they have a spark in their eyes because they see, ooh, cartoons, I like that. So you can really hit a larger audience with something that is more approachable, and it's easier to approach a larger body of audiences, and still not only entertain them, but also make them think about really important and deep things while they're watching a piece of art moving in front of them.
For me, I'd actually never worked in this space before working with Neon Zoo. I've done like commercial projects and some projects for television that were more entertainment based before, and then starting to work with Neon Zoo on these projects that are both beautiful, also entertaining, and then to see the impact. I was with some family who are very anti-immigrant in the United States, which is most unfortunate. And we did this project with the ACLU about a woman coming here from the Congo and how her passport was taken from her at the border, all of her stuff. I mean, everything that she had was taken from her at the border. And then how she was trying to survive here and what that process was like. And to see these family members who, prior to watching this video, were very like, we shouldn't have immigrants here. And it's like, well, your family immigrated here, 100 years ago. What's the difference? But they saw this film and they're like, wow, the problem at the border is more nuanced and more complicated than I had thought it was. And to actually see it happen right in front of me, to see that impact happen was really kind of mind blowing. Because, doing commercials, like, okay, you're helping to sell products, but then to help sell this idea in a way that humans are all essentially the same and we should all be treating each other with that kind of respect that we all deserve, is really an amazing experience. And I'm grateful to be able to work on these kinds of projects with all of these amazing people.
That is the perfect segue, Eric, because before today, I took some time and looked through all the work that you've all collectively worked on at Neon Zoo. And they are a wide range of topics, like you said, immigration, incarceration. They are very traumatic, heavy-hitting things. And so I want to just ask each of you personally one topic that you've worked on, or one video topic that you've worked on that really made a difference to you.
Well, I think I just went, so someone
just
else
did.
want to jump in.
Joumana, you want to go first?
All of them really are really affected me, and they were very, like, I connected with them really strongly, because there are bits and pieces of each that I could like see myself reflected in them, and I tried to also reflect my feelings in a lot of those projects that I worked on. But I feel like Bubjan, which is a project I co-art directed with Ana Mouyis. She's amazing, brilliant art director and animator and director, I think, as well. So this project was like a full circle for me. I had a lot of many interests throughout my childhood. Persian miniature art, some things related to my culture, and how I was able to, tell the story of Paris, the Bubjan, the hero of the story, and connect all of the things that I was raised with or around, and connect them to the story, and it fitting. A lot of like the mythical creature, the bird, the simurg, many little things in our culture that sort of felt like a full circle for me. All of my influences were presented in that film.
That is the wrong button. Thank you. Naghmeh, how about you?
For me, it has to be the New Yorker project that we worked on last year, which was about the the incident that happened during the Women Life Freedom movement in Iran. As a first-generation Iranian, obviously, I was born and raised in Iran and left Iran when I was 24. So I lived a good chunk of my adulthood in Iran, and I remember the kind of the severity and the kind of the suffocating feeling that you had in this kind of situation. I had been in lots of protests when I was living in Iran, so I really knew exactly how those moments felt like, how those the moments of being scared, the moments of feeling unified, the moments feeling like you didn't know the person standing next to you in the street, but you know that they're your comrade and they're going to have your back. So when working on that film, which was a story of a medical resident that realizes that one of her attendees or supervisor has been hospitalized in the hospital that they work because of a heart attack that he had the night before after being chased by the police. So having all those emotions, it was a very really a personal film, because in a lot of ways I could see exactly the things that I experienced a little bit more than 10 years ago in Iran during the Green Movement when I was there, and then seeing all of that happening again in Iran. So when I was working on that film, there was a lot of personal moments in that. There were a lot of parts that I literally would remember something that that the participants said that was a very parallel to something that I had experienced, witnessed, or been part of. So it was a very easy draw from that when we were structuring the story and putting the film together. And it happened at a time when I got invited to work on that film. It was at a time that the protests were kind of dying off. The suffocation was becoming a lot more inside Iran, and you had this sense of hopelessness in terms of what can you do for your people? What can I do to help what is happening? And that was a no-brainer. Working on that film was definitely one of the most personal, although it was a very, it was a client based project, but it was a very personal project in a lot of ways.
Anna, you're next.
Hard to follow that up. I think for me, I really loved working on the Life Up Close series for The Atlantic. It was a 4-part series, and each one was addressing a different kind of issue that had to do with environmental issues or something that I guess was related to the natural world, and then the sort of conflict that follows it, or like the, you know, problems related to that. And each one was kind of beautifully art directed and made in a very distinctive style. They were very like seductive, I guess, in the way that they were animated, I felt like, but it brought the viewers in this way that, you know, maybe they start watching it because, oh, this looks cool, and then they learn something, or, you know, see something in a different perspective. Like I did a piece about amber, which, you know, talked about amber mines and the conflict that ensues from that. And I don't know, I just thought it was a really well told story, and I was given a lot of freedom creatively. So thinking about ways of showing like war and destruction in like ways that are atypical or something you haven't seen before. So it was a real challenge, and it was really an interesting series, and I was really happy to work on that. Yeah.
So these are all very heavy topics, things that, you know, you're not going to go to bed at the end of the day with a big smile on your face, because these are sad, these are traumatic, these are hard things. And I think in the documentary world, we tend to just think, I'm going to tell a story with live action. We're going to go film a bunch of stuff, put a camera up, and we're going to do our thing. Why do you feel animation is the right medium to tell these stories?
I can speak to that a little bit. Well, first of all, we don't have cameras on around the world at all the time. There are lots of stories that there are no documentation of them. I think that's the biggest part of it. And the second most important, which for me at least stands in the same level as not having a camera available, is that animation allows you to go into the worlds that you wouldn't be able to do through live action. It allows you to go to the inner feeling of the characters, so what they're emotionally happening to them, what they're experiencing. So it can go few layers underneath what we usually see in live action documentaries. It allows you to create a world, to have more imagination. It also allows you to remove location, and it can keep the characters anonymous, which can also be a very important part for a lot of the participants.
So with that in mind, when you are all, because you are all directors, if I understand correctly, when you're trying to come up with a story to tell, when you're working with live action, you know, you say you have a camera, you have your cuts, your edits, you're going to like say, I'm going to do this. But in the world of animation, where you can literally make anything, how do you bring those big ideas into something tangible?
I think with animation, one question we can ask that we can go immediately to is, what does this moment feel like? And then when you're thinking like, how does this feel? It's like, okay, well, when I'm thinking about how does this feel, what does that feeling look like? And we can interpret things in a way that's sometimes abstract, sometimes literal, but we can put cameras in places that would be very difficult to put real cameras into. You know, if you want to go into somebody's mind, you can't just like shove a camera through their skull because it'd kill them, right? So we can go into these places and then explore like the, you know, the beautiful colorful sides of someone's happy feelings. And if it's something really dark and depressing, like how do we look at those kinds of moments without, you know, crushing them necessarily, but helping the audience to feel what that thing feels like. And I feel like animation lets us just go right into that place.
I love that. I believe I was talking with Elise last year at a different conversation, and there was a gentleman that was incarcerated, and the phrase that she shared was that he never thought cartoons were going to be able to tell his story as powerfully as anything else. And so I always thought that was kind of a cool thing I wanted to bring up, is that it is a powerful way to it lets out those emotions. One thing I think is really interesting about all of you here is you have a very non-traditional route into the animation world. So, Naghmeh, you have a background in painting. I would like to hear a little bit more about how you transitioned from painting into animation.
Uh, it was a complete coincidence. I studied painting in a very traditional way. I never had computers around me when I was at school, but I started learning Photoshop outside of school, just playing around with it. And then when I was about to graduate, I found out that there was an opportunity for a background designer. And I was like, well, I know a little bit Photoshop. I know how to paint. I just put these together. And is that what they're looking for? So I started as a few months of internship. And then I was kind of like that was my pathway. But then once I started working in animation studios, that's actually where I started getting familiar with the process of animation and seeing animation as an art form rather than cartoons and Disney and what was being imported into Iran at a time. And it was a very organic formation. I had these series of paintings that I was working on during my undergrad years. And I had this goat character in all my paintings. And it was really out of curiosity, I started animating that goat. I was like, how would this goat look like if it was walking? How would it look like if it was running? Now, what about jumping? And then I had all these series of loops. And then I was like, what if I give it a story? And that's literally how I just kind of patched up all these different animated loops I had. And I made a film and I was like, oh, interesting. Now I sent it to film festivals and it was a really big success. And that was a moment for me. I was like, I can use what I learned in painting in a very different in a different manner. Just I have to paint a lot more frames instead of 5 canvases. Now I need 5,000 canvases. So that was the connection.
Helps if I unmute myself. I love that. Ana, your background is actually in illustration, and you like doing things by hand. So, in a world of digital animation, I kind of want to know your journey of taking just one After Effects class to how that completely changed your career trajectory.
Yeah, when I was in high school, I started, my school didn't have art, so I would go to like an after school art. And I just wanted to do fine art, but then I don't know, I was just, my teacher there was like, you should go into illustration. I had no idea what it was. I just have always liked to paint and draw and like build anything by hand. I think I've always been a really process driven artist, which is like an experimental, you know, like experimenting with materiality and seeing what happens. And I also like iterative processes. So like when I was in school for illustration, I did a lot of printmaking, and I did my senior thesis was actually quilts. Like I drew all these drawings and I screen printed them, and then I sewed them together, and you know, these kind of, like finding a process. And the thing about animation, it's all about process. Like 95% of it is just like process and like doing the same thing over and over again. And I think I've always been drawn to that. And kind of letting what happens happen. And when you use paint or hand-drawn animation, there's lots that's out of your control because you can't be too perfect with it. And I just really like that. And I like the animation where you can see the smudges, you can see the like mistakes, you can see the animator in it. And I think that's also why, like, I think it's a great medium for documentary specifically, because it sort of like brings you as an artist into the film in a way, where you can see like that someone is making this and sort of their perspective on a topic or their vision for it. So I guess how I got into animation was just, I graduated in 2009 from Parsons, and the early 2010s was like Vimeo was in a boom. Like there were all these cool animated music videos, and I just thought it was really cool and I really wanted to do animation. So I just started learning animation. I had like a studio in Brooklyn and Greenpoint at the Pencil Factory, and it was just like me and one of my studio mates like working together, like trying to figure out how to animate. So yeah.
I love that. And you said something back there about like those imperfections. It almost brings that character and that personality to life. I just think it's a nice little touch on that as well. Joumana, you received your master's in animation at RCA, and recently you and your friend Hannah started Pickle Collective to preserve stories, which I thought was a genius little play on words there. Was animation always your plan?
Yeah, I was an animation obsessed kid in the Middle East. I lived in Saudi Arabia and in Syria, and we had Japanese anime dubbed into Arabic, and I was obsessed. I would draw the characters. I was just drawing characters all the time. I would watch the making of more than the film itself, like in Disney. See the animators doing the characters. I was very obsessed with that. However, there were no animation courses in Syria. I was studying my BA in Damascus. And so I did graphic design, and then things got really bad in Syria. We had to move. So I just stuck with graphic design for the longest time. And then I realized that people are using animation again, like 2D animation for commercials and stuff. So I felt like, oh, maybe that's like my way into it somehow. It's alive again, because for years we were only seeing 3D animation, which is great, but not my thing. And I really wanted to do more of the 2D animation. So all of my drawing practice helped me get into the RCA, even though I had zero knowledge in animation. I just knew how things are done, but I'm very like the classical method of like, you need to be really good at drawing before you start trying to animate. And I realized that was not necessarily the case. But yeah, I've always been chasing animation. So I'm very grateful to the universe that I've reached reached it finally.
I love that. I love animating, but I am a terrible illustrator. So I'm glad to hear like you had that ability to say, okay, it's not all about drawing. You can kind of move past and learn some more things in animation side too.
Absolutely not. Yeah, don't just animate. Don't let it stop.
Eric, you might have the biggest career pivot of all of us here because before animation, you were a professional ballet dancer before diving into animation. And that is a major career shift. So I kind of want to know more about your journey, your experience going from one art style to a completely different one.
Yeah, so in the mid-20s, I hit a point with dancing where um I don't know if anybody has seen the film Cinderella with Brandy and Whitney Houston, right? Like the good one. Um and Elise saying yes in the chat. Um there was a woman who played one of the stepsisters, and I met her at a show, at a workshop in New York, and we got to chatting. And then she was super cool. And I met her, ran into her like 6 months later on the street in New York. And I was still dancing at the time. I had left ballet and I was doing musical theater here. And she remembered who I was, which I was floored by because, I spent maybe 15 minutes talking to this woman before. And I said, "Oh, where are you coming from? What are you doing?" And she said, "Oh, I just had an audition, and it's me against, these 15 other women who are all Tony Award winners, and there was an Oscar nominee in the mix for this role she was trying to get." And I had been going to auditions in New York, and every audition there's 150 to 500 people all gunning for the same 5 or 6 spots, if it's even that many. And I thought, this woman is in a career. She's like 50 years older than I am, and I don't necessarily want to still be chomping at the bit for those roles at that point in my life. And I was like, I gotta figure out something else. So I went to NYU, got into a creative writing program there. And then I found the Yukai Do's animation work. I actually was in this writing program and ended up pivoting. I'm a pivoter, what can I say? I learned how to pivot really well when I was a dancer. Um, and I found Yukai Do's work, and I was like, oh, this is beautiful. This is animation, but this isn't Disney, which wasn't something I would have been that interested in. And I just became completely obsessed. I was spending all of my time that I wasn't in school or wasn't doing my homework. And even when I was supposed to be doing homework, I was like working on animation and learning After Effects and learning Photoshop and learning TV Paint. Um, and it just became, I guess that's how I became a ballet dancer too, is I was obsessed with it. I'm a bit of an obsessive person. So I didn't even start drawing until I was 30 years old. And now 35, I'm working, with different animation studios all over the world. So it's been a life of pivots, and there are probably more to come.
You said something there that really made my ears perk up, and that it wasn't just Disney, that there's more opportunities out there than just your major Pixar films. I guess I want to talk to you, the entire panel, a little bit about this. How has, was that ever a goal of yours where you're like, I want to work for the big animation company? Or is it always, I want to find my voice and tell these untold stories?
For me, it's really just about working with people that are pleasant to work with and that are pushing me to be better and are really interested in what they're doing. And generally projects also that help pay rent. That's nice too. That doesn't always happen. Although, there are a lot of them out there, and you don't have to be working for the biggest companies in the world to make a really good living. Um, that's for sure.
Yeah, I don't think Disney was ever really, or a studio was ever really on my wish list. I think I always just wanted to be, like an artist making things and somehow find a way to make a living doing that. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I was kind of naive and unrealistic, but it worked out. So
Joumana, you're next.
Oh, okay. I thought you were next. That's fine. No, I really wanted to work with so many studios, which I have worked with some, and but Disney was not a thing since Disney pivoted to 3D completely. Like when I was a kid, so I'm like, okay, fine. So Disney's not an option anymore. But there are studios that I will still like to work with. And the animator in me wants to be more skillful. So I feel like being in specific studios that flush out really cool commercial stuff or really high quality projects just makes me feel like, oh, I'm learning more. I'm becoming better as an animator. I would love to. I mean, the guys everyone knows here. I would love to work on Japanese anime at some point, although like the pay is really horrible. But if I can just hone my skills and just become better, be more confident as an animator. But certainly I'm also pivoting from that. Like I know like the animator in me wants to be better, but the director-ish wants to tell her own stories as well, especially now. I mean, I'm 35. It's about time. But yeah. So slowly pivoting to telling my own stories, but still like teeny tiny bit of me wants to do the other things. I just want to do everything.
I think I never had the courage to have a dream of working at Disney or Pixar, because at the time that I figured out that animation could be the thing for me, I really couldn't see my style fitting in any of those studios. So I very early on I was like, I don't think I should even try. I'm not gonna get my hopes high. And on the other side, I did work in animation studios a few years in Iran and a few years in the States, and I like on and off. And to be honest, I really didn't like. I loved my colleagues and the studio environment, but I did not like the projects that we were working on and the deadlines and the crushing time. And the more I spend time in those studios, I felt the less of an artist I'm becoming. Your creative senses are being they become dull because you're working on a commercial, you're working on something that the deadline is like tomorrow. So you just have to like get things together. I mean, that still happens in freelancing, but I think you go in as an independent artist when you're a freelancer. And when I met Elise before Nyanzu was a thing yet, back in 2017, that was actually the first time that I worked on a freelance project that it was not only artistic, but also it was it was a project for ACLU, and it was very important and it was very powerful. And I realized that, oh, I don't have to go and work in the studios. I had seen other people kind of creating their own path, but I never was courageous enough to think of that for myself. But it just kind of happened to be that, and I'm grateful that it happened that way.
I love that. I love that. Now I need a quick thumbs up or thumbs down, because if I understand correctly, you've all worked together with Nyanzu together, but you're all also chasing your own stories and producing your own pieces of art as well. Is that correct? Perfect. So I'm curious. I think one thing a lot of filmmakers and documentary makers have is, how do I fund my project? And so I kind of want to talk a little bit about the behind the scenes stuff of just like, how do you A, find this idea, and then B, bring it to life?
Oof.
I'll
I have no
jump
answer.
in on that one, unless somebody wants to. Um, for me personally, especially working in the States, the way that I fund it is I'm working 4 jobs between now and the end of September. So there's, I would be weekend working. I'm not pushing to anybody needs to have bad work schedules, because this is not a great work schedule. But if you want to make enough money to fund your own projects, sometimes you take 3 or 4 jobs that come in all at the same time, and then block off time to work on your own projects on the side. Sometimes you can get investors. I know if you're in Europe, there are a lot more grants than we have, especially if you're in Germany, or if you're in Switzerland. I've got some Swiss filmmaker friends, and man, one of them got like a $350,000 grant for a 14-minute short film that doesn't even have to like be about anything specific. It's just whatever film that they wanted to make, and they pitched it and they got the money and now they're making it. So in the US, it's really just you make the money and then you know, make the project that you want to make, or you find someone to invest in it. But then you have to be really careful because sometimes those investors will want certain kinds of creative controls. So it's important to have contracts that say, you're the money, that's it. Which, you know, finding an investor who's willing to do that, give them my email. I'd love to talk to them.
You wrapped it up pretty well. Yeah, funding in US is almost close to impossible. Anything more than $20,000, I think you can find 5,000, 3,000, 2,000 here and there. Artist residencies, schools, festivals, or just people. But I think anything beyond that, I haven't find it. So put my email next to Eric's, please, whoever has those connections. But yeah, and that's actually very tricky because we work on these really polished client work that it's a group of us, we're getting paid, everyone is putting their 100% on it, and we are a group of they're real talents in these projects, and that's why they look so amazing. Like Bob John, I Had Nothing, all of these have such a strong team of people working on them. And then when it comes to personal projects, because you don't have money, well, I'm not going to ask Joumana to spend like 5 months animating on my film. Are you? Without
I'll
having
ask her, she'll say no, but
Please do. I would never say no to you.
ooh, I'm
that's
gonna
not the
remember that.
point.
I
But
think this is being recorded.
But it is a reality, is that when you're working on film of your own, you need to realize that the production of it, how it's going to be feasible. If you're going to be a one-man band, you have to probably compromise a lot of things like the style and the complexity of the design. So it really makes it difficult to work as an independent filmmaker when you don't have that funding background, because then you can't have your amazing friends work on them and not feel crushing guilt that you're keeping them up till 3 a.m. for 5 months.
Well, that's a great segue then, because if money is a limited thing, and it is, that means you can only tell so many stories. And there are, in my day-to-day life, I can think of 5 stories every single day that I want to tell. So how do you guys pick one and say, this is the one that needs the love, the attention?
Well, for me, I've been working on one project for about 3 years now. The idea even started before, like maybe really like 5 years more like, but I started actively working on it for 3 years, and it was part of a residency that I was invited to do at Animated Fest in Cyprus. And then I got some funding to go to that. And all the funding I get that isn't my own money is through grants that are associated with institutions, educational institutions. So that's another thing, is when you're when you do full-time teaching, you're kind of able to self-fund a little bit because you're expected to work on a project during the summer and you're getting paid and you're not teaching. So there is like some room in there to like self-fund. And then there are grant opportunities. But because I got like this sort of residency and a grant, that kind of like started the project, and it was a sort of very personal project about Cyprus and the conflict there. And once you get started on that, you have like a little bit of impetus at the beginning, and then you're kind of tied in and you're like, okay, I really need to finish this, but it takes so long when you're doing it all yourself and with very limited funds. So it's almost like you're kind of just stuck in it a little bit. I feel that's how I feel. I'm almost done. So hopefully I'll be finished soon and I can move on. But I just feel like I haven't been able to move on from this idea for years now. So I think just the nature of animation taking so long, like once you start something, whatever the reason is you start it, you kind of just get into it, and then you're just doing that for years. Yeah.
It's amazing that you kept at it for 2 years. I have so much admiration because I I don't think I would have the patience. I have so many ideas and I always struggle with this thing where like I lose some of the drive for some of the stories, but I feel like you know your gut kind of tells you which one you need to really, really pursue and just go for it. And when you feel like, oh, you're starting to work on the ideas and the writing on your own, and then maybe thinking of the style and drawing a little bit, basically, I feel for me, this is a sign that, oh, this is it. This is the one I want to focus on. This is the one I want to work on. It's more of a gut feeling, at least for me.
I think Drysen, I think the question was, how do you pick one? I'm not really sure what the phrase pick one means. For me, I find that picking one project to work on, again, not really sure what that means. If anyone wants to define it, that'd be great. It might be helpful. I find it very stressful because the whole time I'm working on one of those projects, all I'm really thinking about is the other one that I want to be working on. So I've just found that the projects take longer to make, but it's about sectioning off time and letting each one of them, it's like having a lot of kids, right? Like you don't, hopefully, just don't ignore some of the children, then 8 years later, like, oh, hey, who's that? I don't know who that is living with me. But I just take the time to, throughout the week or throughout the month, say, okay, this day is this project, this day is this project. And sometimes it's just an hour or two of working on note cards for an outline, of laying them out on the floor and just seeing that story start to build. And sometimes it's working on a few illustrations for backgrounds for a different piece. And sometimes it's just, thinking about what is this character saying to this other character and how do they feel about that?
Anything you want to add, Naghmeh?
I mean, kind of everyone said it all. I think the animation, because most of the process of writing and creating and editing happens in the pre-production, very different from live action. Because you have all of that happening in the pre-production, it kind of like what Ana said, locks you in to that project. Not necessarily in a way that you cannot start other things, but you cannot abandon that idea because you've established it, you've thought about it, but then if working independently means that your projects are going to take 5 to 7 years sometimes, or even more, whereas the client-based projects can have a much faster turnaround because of the time chunk that you dedicate to that project. And when you go through an idea for 5 years, there are lots of people that hopefully you have to pitch the idea to and get reaction to. So you kind of know the amount of dedication that you're putting into that idea, if it's working or not. So you're doing all that editing before. So I think that kind of refines that idea that you pick. So it's not the idea that you work on might not be the idea that you picked in the beginning, but it has the core of that idea or sense of it in a way.
I think it's a perfect segue to my next question, where this is all about storytelling, and animation just happens to be the medium in which we do it. So I guess I want to know just a little bit more about why do you all feel that animation is the way to tell the stories that you want to tell?
It's fun. Not so much to, I mean, I think I mentioned it before. It reaches a much larger audience, or it can reach a much larger audience if it's being promoted and shown and published in the right way. The same way that Netflix puts, for example, a film in the highlight and suddenly you see that it's a hit. I think the same thing can happen for animation. And for me, what I really love about it is that there's no limit to animation. I can defy the rule of gravity and everything that I want. I can make the world upside down or downside up, and no one is going to question that. And I really, as someone coming from that fine art background, that is very important, that you have liberty to do whatever you think is the right thing, and kind of go deeper into just showing the surface of the story, but you can really go deeper into being more imaginative, being more sensible, and really talk about deeper things that way.
Do you feel that as a viewer watching an animation, you have a different impact than watching live action?
Definitely. I feel it. At least I have that sensation. When I watch animated film, I am definitely more impacted by it than live action.
So one thing I want to, because I think we might have some students in here today, and in case anyone is inspired by potentially maybe looking into animation as another art form to master, another way to tell their stories, I kind of want to just pick all of your brains to say, if I, as someone who has zero experience with animation, am interested in trying to wrangle that monster, how do I go about starting?
Woof. Um, that's a loaded question. I feel like start cheap. Start cheap. If you know, can do a flip book to get the feel for how images, I mean, even a, like a notebook, like a calendar notebook, and just getting in the corners of those pages, depending on how committed you want to get, and see how one image to the next, you can tell a story in sometimes 24 frames, sometimes 6 frames. We can tell stories really fast. I'd say start cheap first.
Download the stop motion app free on your phone, and you can take little like sequences. You can do some stop motion. You could, if you draw the frames, you can photograph them one at a time, and things start to come together. I think once you get something to move in a way that is satisfying and you intended, that's when you're hooked on it. And that's when you can't stop. But yeah, like the classes I've taught with, like, grade school kids in summer programs, like I always have them use the app, because it's such an easy way to sequence frames, because you don't need, like, I don't know, Adobe software or like a fancy camera or whatever. So that's access.
Yeah. And I think animation is a bridge between everything, between music, sound design, dance, film, writing. So from whatever creative field that you're interested, that can be your segue into animation. I love what Eric and Anna said. Start cheap, don't get too technical, just start very simple. But really, from whatever creative background that you come, there is a way for you to get involved in animation, because I think animation is a combination of all the forms of arts that we know out there.
I also would say don't focus on the drawing itself. You can animate a shape, you can animate a dot, you can animate a star, whatever it is. Just try and get the thing moving, and that thing could have its own character. Like, it doesn't have to be a human-like or an animal-like. It's just gonna make you expect too much of yourself. And it's also fun to kind of give character to random abstract things. And with that, you'll understand timing and spacing, which is the most fun part of animation.
So what I think was very fascinating here. Oh, sorry, Anna, go ahead.
I was just saying, watch films too, because that's a big part of why you start to love animation, for like what Joumana was saying, like if you want to just think about movement, like go watch Norm McLaren's Boogie Doodle, or like something that's like really simple, really old school, like that kind of thing, and you can get really inspired and then want to copy it a little bit. Yeah.
What I think was really interesting about all of your answers here is it wasn't go learn After Effects or go learn 3D or go learn 2D. It was very much so the basics of just play and try to learn how things move, learn the craft of it, Don't worry about the tools. That'll come later. That's really cool. I like that. I like that a lot. We have just a couple minutes left here. So what I want to do to wrap up is I just want to ask the one final question to each of you is, to you, what is impact storytelling, and what does it mean to you?
I think whatever film that you watch and you come out of the theater or after finishing watching it, you just have a moment of contemplation about what you just watched. Either it gives you awareness or it gives you an emotional reaction. I think that is an impactful storytelling in a way that you're connecting in a more humane and personal level with the audience. It's even if it's a personal story, you're telling it in a way that it's relatable to your audience. I think making it relatable, making it sensible is that's how I feel about it.
I
Yeah,
second
absolutely.
that.
Tears and laughter.
I love it. I love it. So that is really all the questions I have for our panel today. Before I wrap up, I just want to say thanks again to the New Filmmakers Los Angeles for bringing us all together. And of course, Legends Animated for hosting us as well. And Neon Zoo for bringing all 4 or 5 of us together, because without that common denominator, we would not be here today. So with that spirit in mind, I need a thumbs up or thumbs down, because I heard a rumor that today is actually Elise Kelly's birthday. Did I get that right? It's not.
It was yesterday.
It was yesterday. Well, then I want to say, like, happy belated birthday. I am slow to read my Slack messages. Oh, but yes, I just want to say again, all of you, thank you for the work you do, because you are truly bringing a voice to stories that need to be told. And the work you do is absolutely beautiful. It's something you don't see every single day. And just from my heart, I want to thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. Thank you, Drysen.
And with that, I think we're ready to open it up to questions.
Yeah, I'll just jump in really quick. Thank you so much, Drysen. I'll just let everybody know that as we start the audience Q&A, if you have a question, you can raise your virtual hand to ask it. If you don't know how to do that, you click react or reactions at the bottom of the Zoom screen. I think in the newer Zoom, there's like a heart on the icon. So you click that and then you click raise hand. And that just puts a little hand emoji next to your face so that we know who's raising their hand and who has a question. And then when I call on you, I will just unmute you on my end so that everybody can hear your question. If you don't have like audio, or you're in a place where you feel like you can't ask your question, like with your microphone, feel free to also ask your question in the chat, and we can read it out for you during this portion. So yeah, who wants to start with the first question in the audience? CJ, I am going to unmute you and then you'll have to unmute yourself.
Hi, you should be seeing me. I'm not seeing myself. So my question is, I'm a documentary director and I have a film coming up that I really want some animation for, and the animation is going to change throughout, starting very rough and becoming much more sophisticated, following advertising guys, creating following their ideas. So it's really getting inside their minds and bringing their ideas to life. But I don't know, first, how to find the animator of my dreams, and secondly, what the process is, how we work together. So if you could just touch on that a little bit, that would really help me. Thanks.
I think Elise should answer this question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, usually getting connected with animation producers that they do this kind of work, which at least is one of them. They can connect you with lots of people, depending on the style that you're looking for, the kind of vision that you have for the film. I think that's the most important thing. So whoever you're trying to approach, I would say have an example or two of animated films. It doesn't necessarily have to be documentary, any kind of animated work that you think would be the style and the feeling of it you like. That could be a really good starting point to see who can be a good fit for the project that you have in mind.
You could also, I don't know if there are specific animators that you've seen their work or their films. You can reach out directly to animators. Usually on their website, there's an email address, or even on Instagram if people direct message me about stuff. So, and even if it's not like to hire them directly, but maybe just to see, you know, if they'd be interested in working, or if they have like a producer they like to work with, or, you know, then you can sort of like get your way into that sphere. But yeah, I would just reach out to people that you think might be a good fit. Yeah.
CJ, I unmuted you in case you have any follow-ups, but if not, no worries.
Well, I guess no, that's great. I guess it's at this point, or like 50% through filming, when I'm sure you'd like to get involved as soon as possible, but there are money concerns and that kind of thing. When do you typically become involved in a project, and how closely do you work with the director and make this happen?
That tends to vary a fair bit depending on the project. Sometimes we get involved very early in a project to just start talking about, you know, what kind of shots do you have? What kind of shots do you need? What kind of story are we going to try and tell? What's the team we want to put together? And maybe that conversation is, you know, months or years before the point at which you're actually gearing up for production. Some very, very early conversations happen when there is no budget, so we can figure out, you know, what kind of budget would we need to put together? What's the size of the team we'd need to put together to work on these projects? Those conversations don't last for a long time before there's money involved, but there's certainly room to talk, you know, how much do we need? How much time do we need to make this thing work? And also sometimes it's like, you know, if you've got a deadline that's a month away, it doesn't sound like you do, but if you have a deadline that's a month away, production can scale up really quickly. It tends to be more expensive that way. But it's possible. You just have a lot more people working on something. So if you're ready to talk about animation, then that's a good time to start finding out what it is that you're going to need to know, so that when you're actually ready to get animation going, you're not then scrambling to figure out the answers to, you know, who is going to do it and how much time are we going to have, and oh crap, we've actually got this deadline that's like 2 weeks out and we need X, Y, and Z. It's better to know those things in advance, so you've got time also to save money for yourself, you know.
Yeah, and kind of following up what Eric said, I think it's important to know how long the animation is going to be, or how much of the film you need to be animated, because that animation is a very different timeline than what live action does. It's going to be, for 1 minute of animated film, you might have 6 months of production. So it can be a really long time process depending on what style and how complicated the film or the design you want it to be, or the movements are going to be. And to answer your question about how close of the relationship to have with the director, I think it has to be a very close relationship. Although we worked on projects that the director was never present during the entire process of filmmaking, which is really, really unfortunate. But at the same time, understanding that the animation team that you're bringing on, they're expert in this field, and giving them liberty and space to bring their creativity into this project is also part of the reason that you're bringing an animator into this, or an animation filmmaker into the project. So I think it has to be a very mutual understanding from the beginning, so that the sooner you bring your animation team involved, getting them involved, the better the film is going to be, and you're going to get a better result.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Next person raising their hand is Sahil. We'll ask you to unmute now.
Hello, everyone. First off, I'm really glad to meet you all. I'm sorry that I'm working with my computer. It doesn't have a video cam. But my question is, what are the steps involved in making an animated movie, be it a short or a feature? Like, I'm assuming that you begin with the script, but then what needs to be done next? Like, you talked about how the editing process is also things like that needs to be done in the pre-production itself. But can you please elaborate on these steps? Yeah.
Usually when you have a script, you start, I think, from storyboarding after. So you do storyboards. Sometimes if the production is long, you can even start with concept art, like what style you want the animation part to be before you even get into the storyboarding. But usually you start storyboarding. Storyboarding is basically thumbnail drawings of each big part of the script that is happening. And then you put that in an animatic, which is a timed storyboard. So you put the storyboard on a timeline and you see, basically you fit the storyboard in the animation time that the film needs. And then there's the style frames. Anyone wants to carry on?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these can happen simultaneously. The part where Joumana was talking about the animatic, that's basically where the editing for animation happens, meaning that after animatic, we almost get to picture lock, meaning that the timing and the movement and the composition are not going to change till the animation is fully done. All the movements are added and the color is added. So once we finish the storyboarding process and go into animatic, we pretty much get to picture lock, which means that the movement, the camera angle, none of those will change. What happens is that you just add layer and layer of completion to it. For example, you start with adding the movement to characters with rough drawings, and then you go, you create the backgrounds at the same time. Obviously there is a lot of design in between happening, like the style frames that Joumana mentioned. And yeah, kind of like saying it very in an MP3 form.
Or you can do an experimental process and just start animating whatever's in your head and just draw one frame at a time until it's done.
I have a friend who made a film by animating a whole bunch of different shots as if they were doing shots on location and then editing it afterwards. I thought it was a bit insane, and she also thought it was a bit insane after the fact. She's like, "There's a lot of extra work."
Did she use all of them?
No, and they were like not even just like penciled, like some of them were fully painted, like full shots that didn't make the final cut because when she was cutting it together, it just didn't feel right. It's wild.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next is Cameron.
Oh, now hello everybody, and I'm speaking from Chicago International Airport, and I'm going to Los Angeles, and tomorrow I will participate in your festival, which will host by New Filmmakers of Los Angeles. My question: I'm a member of Television Academy, and I have students, and we have differed between auteur cinema and mainstream. And how stories in the independent animation industry differ from traditional animation industry. traditional animation industry. I mean, Disney, DreamWorks, and another, and also we have outdoor cinema.
So the question is how like the independent animation world kind of differs from the more mainstream stuff, right? I mean, to me, it feels like the mainstream animation world tends to be very corporate minded. There's a lot about how, you know, and it, to an extent, it makes sense when you're going to spend 30-40 million dollars to make a film. You have to say, how am I going to make this money back? Because if we just make 30-40 million dollar films and we never make any money, it will eventually go bankrupt. Our company will go bankrupt, right? I feel like in independent animation, we often are making films that feel more personal and sometimes are a bit more unique. The story isn't necessarily something that's going to have mass appeal, although sometimes the stories do have mass appeal. But we don't necessarily have to think about, you know, are we going to sell 800 million tickets to this thing in a box office, or are we going to be able to get into a festival that might lead to, you know, a residency somewhere, or that might lead to some more directing projects for other films like this or for commercials. I feel like either way, telling great stories is what matters, because even if you're doing a, you know, a Disney, Pixar film, if the story is not good, nobody cares. Nobody's going to want to watch it. And then eventually those companies start to slip down and their films aren't, you know, felt the same way that, at least for us, that I think all feel about a lot of 90s animation shows and films that felt like very unique people were able to tell very unique stories that even in that uniqueness, when they get that core of human emotion, that's what, to Drysen's question, what is impact storytelling? It's about that core of emotion that really almost any, you know, place on earth that you're living in, you can feel what that character feels. And it's when we're not told, this is how you should be feeling for this character right now, but we actually genuinely feel that because the situation has made us feel that way. I feel like that's really the difference, is that we get to really focus on those feeling moments, and we don't necessarily have to focus on making those feeling moments, but actually feeling them.
Thank you so much.
And I'm gonna add to that. I think one of the biggest differences as a non-American witnessing it, I feel like it's a lot about marketing. If indie animation had the same money, the same amount of money for marketing the projects that we're working, then Disney and DreamWorks are not going to be mainstream and us going to be independent filmmakers. We could also be independent filmmakers that have as much presence as Disney and DreamWorks and everyone else. But I think the marketing and saturating the market and streaming services with just because they have the money that we simply don't, or the support that they have created for themselves that we don't, and capitalizing on this form of art and really venturing it out and kind of closing all the doors for independent animators. That's how it feels on the other side too, that the stories sometimes can be very similar, but the marketing is the biggest challenge, I feel like.
Thank you.
I'll just add one thing, because I think animation isn't so different from just the general film world, in the way that like mainstream film and animation become very formulaic in the way that they tell stories and their narrative. Whereas when you're independent, you can really experiment more and like try different things, and you can take more risks because you're usually working in short format, and you know there isn't as big of a budget. And with animation, especially, since you can draw all the frames, you don't need to hire actors, you don't need to, like, I know it's a lot of work, but you can pretty much make a film by yourself, like for free on paper. Well, paper's not free, but you get what I mean. So it allows you to try narrative formats that wouldn't pass the like marketing team at Disney or Universal or wherever the film is being made. So I think it's the same in all filmmaking really. But yeah, sorry, Joumana, you were gonna say something too.
Yeah, I was gonna say the exact same thing. It's just more independent animation has the ability to be more experimental. Even like the hero story, we can play around with it, and we don't need to, like, the hero's journey could be different. Whilst in Disney, it's always like the same kind of formula. So yeah, we have less pressure to make money out of what we do, so we can be a bit more free in experimenting on how we want to tell the story.
Thank you so much.
Okay, next is Gerard.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for sharing your wisdom and your insights, first of all, and taking the time for what you're doing here. I really appreciate that. My question specifically is, and I don't know who it would go to, but I noticed that specifically in the space that you're in, as Ana had mentioned already, there are grants specifically for certain stories that will help highlight disenfranchised or people who are in distress, and it's not just within the United States, it's like international. But from a business sense, it looks like, those grants to tell those stories, many of them are animated. They require you to have a 501c for a company for that to even be eligible for that. Would you recommend, if this is, for a person who has the desire to convey these stories of humanity, and to be in that kind of space, would it be more advisable to create like a 501c? If you're independent, I get it, you're doing it yourself, but if you're trying to do it in a sense that you're eligible for these sort of funds to help subsidize what you're trying to do, would that be the way to go, or does it even matter the way you incorporate? So I don't know if there's a question in there somewhere, but I think I conveyed it. But that's all. So thank you.
I think you can get fiscal sponsorship from nonprofits. So I know New York Foundation of the Arts, like I think that's one of the sponsors for this talk, is a fiscal sponsor, and they don't give you any money, but they will, any grant you apply for that requires that nonprofit status, they will give the fiscal sponsor the money, and then the fiscal sponsor will take a fee and then give you the rest of the money. So you don't have to start a nonprofit, you can just get fiscal sponsorship. And there's a lot of people, a lot of different organizations that do that. And you can get the fiscal sponsor after getting the grant too. A lot of grants will give you leeway to figure out how to work that out before, so you can apply for the grant without having a fiscal sponsor, and they will give you time. Not all of them, but a lot of them will just give you time to find someone to process the money for you.
That's cool.
And as
I didn't know that.
Leslie just shared in the chat too, that Legends Animated also offers fiscal sponsorships. So thank you for Legends Animated for putting this together.
Sorry, I didn't realize I had the power again to unmute. No, that answered it. So Neon Zoo does it, and apparently Legends Animated also offers, like what you mentioned. I don't even know the terminology, fiscal sponsorships for such things to allow you to do that. Is that right?
Neon Zoo is a production, animation production studio. Doesn't do sponsorship, but yeah, even the projects that we're working on through Neon Zoo, we still have to get a fiscal sponsor.
Okay. I'm just asking because sometimes, before I even signed up for this, I've been in that space. Well, not in the space as in working in it, but looking. And, sometimes I see a door or see something that's like, all right, well, I'm going to get shot down immediately before I even get a chance to even get in there. So I didn't know there was a collab, like you're saying, where you can actually work together and do these things. So it's much easier having help, as you well know. So thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and for every grant, just look at the FAQs and they'll usually address like when you need to have the fiscal sponsor, or those usually questions about that. So just for every individual grant, they might have a different process. So just check that.
I did it again. I'm muting myself. Sorry. I just thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Thank you.
Elise?
Thanks so much for sharing all of this wonderful information. And I know we don't have too much longer. And if there were other questions, you don't have to answer this and you can jump to the other question. But I'm curious in a sentence or two, if needed, pending time, what everyone's working on now and or what you're most excited about. I think, Eric, you already said you're working on a billion things, but just curious to that point that Drysen was asking earlier of what are you passionate about and what are the things that you're spending time on. I'm wondering if there is anything on the horizon for all of you.
Well, this is a question you know the answer to. Well, for me, I'm gonna finish my epic film. That's not even that long, but hopefully. And it's actually a lot of live action. It's a documentary film about Cyprus and the culture there and the conflict. It's a experimental documentary with some animation, soon to be out in the world.
Excited to see it.
And Elise, Neon Zoo are producing the film, so that's why I said Elise knows very well what I'm working on.
I like how Elise is putting us on the spot to talk about the project. I am working on a series of short films about children in the Middle East in warring zones where they are the heroes of their own stories. This is something that has been haunting me for the past 10 months. And I felt like it's time to do it. I've always been trying to do things related to my experience in my home country, Syria, and do things for grown-ups. And I thought that I felt like that the message has to be for kids this time and to focus on them. So I'm very excited. Again, Neon Zoo is producing it with Pickle Collective, with my partner in crime, Hannah. Yeah, very excited. A lot is happening, but yeah, fingers crossed.
Eric, go.
There's a short film that I'm working on that's also being produced by Neon Zoo. There's a couple of scripts and there's a graphic novel, and everything is very queer positive and queer focused, not necessarily on that aspect of it, but that featuring people who are queer and not necessarily making it all about that, but having more visibility for those kinds of characters. So that's what's going on.
And I'm working on and off on a film idea that it's about the connection between memories and grief disorder that anyone can experience through their life and what happened to those memories. This is a very evolving idea, but the part that has stayed the same is the memory part and what happens to these fragmented memories that we have once you go something when you go through something that creates that grief, put that very deep grief in you. And another project is both of them are documentary, one of them a bit more experimental, the other one is about the systematic suppression that the Iranian regime has put on education throughout the last 40 years. I haven't picked which one I'm going to work on, but they're both ideas that they're kind of brewing. And also is being produced by Neon Zoo. I forgot to mention that.
Well, we do have like a couple minutes if there are any last questions. Last call. Okay, I don't see anything. But I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. This has been such a great panel. Thank you to all of the panelists and to Drysen, the moderator, and Elise and Leslie for putting this together. I'll hand it over to Bojana to kind of close everything out. But again, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bojana, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. Thank you for sharing all of your knowledge with us, for having this wonderful talk. And thank you to Drysen for leading such a thoughtful, moderated portion of the discussion. And thank you to our audience for coming out today, for asking such great questions and keeping that conversation going. And we invite you all to join us again here this evening at 5 p.m. Pacific time for International Animation Development and Production with Studio Gillet from Australia. So we hope to see you all here. And have a great rest of your Friday, however much of it may be left, depending on your time zone. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you,
all.
everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.